Mike Cush will lead the pledge. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and the blessings you've given us, and we thank you for the rain you've given us, and we pray, Heavenly Father, that you will continue to be with us, continue to be with our county leaders, and give them strength and wisdom to carry this county forward. And we pray, Heavenly Father, that you'll just be with us here tonight in our meeting. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May be seated, please. Call roll, please, ma'am.
Richie Bolin. Here. Jeff Phillips. Will Jordan. Here. Mike Cush. Present. Mike Vaught.
Here.
Gary Farley.
Here.
Steve Sandlin.
Here.
Rhonda Allen.
Here.
Vincent Windrow.
Here.
Veronica Buchanan.
Here.
And Craig Lynch.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, we do have a quorum. I'll entertain a motion on the reading of our minutes. Do I have a second? Steve, second. All for the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. David?
Building Codes Department report is on the desk for June.
Okay. I can look at that. Doug, we have anything withdrawn or deferred?
No, sir.
Reclassification requests, sign regulation amendments. Doug, you want to go over that, and then we'll open it up for public hearing?
Yes, sir. I will. Thank you very much. This is, if you just bear with me for just about 5 minutes or so, hopefully just 5 minutes. I'm just going to kind of give you an overview. We're not going to go into the presentation that we had during the work session, but I am going to kind of hit some of the high points of the amendments we have tonight. Again, we're very happy tonight to bring you amendments to our sign regulations. As a refresher, this is something that was on our work schedule for 2010. We did have our first presentation on this at our February Planning Commission Day meeting this year, where we kind of went over some of the issues that we were going to be considering. We followed that up with a seminar by Dr. Kelly that several of you attended back in March of this year. We did present our first draft of this at the Planning Commission at their May 24th meeting, and then made some revisions to that based on the comments we received, and presented those revisions at the June 14th meeting. And this public hearing was set at that time. The three goals of this project were basically to modernize our regulations. Our regulations haven't been really updated in over 10 years, and probably longer than that. Sign law, as well as technology dealing with signage, has evolved a fair amount over that time. And we felt that it was time to consider some amendments to our regulations, and what you are seeing here tonight really is an overhaul of what we currently have in our zoning resolution. We also looked at some automatic changeable copy signage. This point follows really from the first point about sign technology evolving over time. We had received comments from the public as well as planning commissioners inquiring about the possibility of allowing a little bit of dynamic signage in our sign regulations, what we're calling automatic changeable copy. So, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but we have made some allowances for that kind of signage with these amendments. Also looking at content neutrality. Again, simply put, basically what we're trying to do is eliminate distinctions between types of signage, where when you look at, you have to look at the sign in order to be able to tell what kind of sign it is. Basically, the questions it asks is, do you have to look at the message to determine whether or not the rule applies, or are we trying to regulate or censor content? Basically, if you answer yes to either of those questions, you have a content-based regulation. And so we've looked at our provisions and have reworked a lot of our regulations to make them more content neutral. Again, I'm not going to go over all the changes that we're proposing, but I am going to go through just some of the high points. One of them is, and you should have copies on your desk, both of the old regulations that are currently within our zoning resolution as well as our proposal. We have updated our definitions regarding signage. Basically, we've taken a look at the definitions that we currently have, looked at several different sources for better and new definitions, and have replaced those old definitions with some updated ones. Again, allowance of automatic changeable copy signage. Basically, what we're going to propose allowing a limited use of this technology in both commercial, industrial areas as well as residential areas. We're looking right now at limiting 25% of the sign area in residential areas, and then 50% in commercial and industrial areas. Identification of additional sign types. Our current regulations really only identify 4 or 5 different types: ground signs, wall, projecting, graphic, and directional. We've added a few other sign types, including awning, canopy, and flag signs. Easier identification of prohibited signs and signs which are allowed without a permit and signs that require a permit. We've labeled those a lot more clearly than they were in the original resolution we currently have. We made some provisions for multiple tenant buildings. Our current regulations really don't have any provisions for multiple tenant buildings. We don't see a lot of those in the county, but we do see enough that we felt that it was time to have some provisions for multiple tenant buildings. More detailed sign permitting requirements. This proposed process, the proposed process for obtaining a sign permit is more detailed than what's currently in our resolution in regards to application requirements and also time frames, which based on our research is something that's very important to have in your sign codes. We've updated our temporary sign section. Our existing regulations differentiated a lot between the different types of signs, political, real estate, those kind of things. We've really just lumped them all into temporary signage and have provided limits which we feel are appropriate for the areas that they are in. And also the last major change is we're proposing to adopt special criteria for sign variance requests. At this time, when the Board of Zoning Appeals hears variance requests for signage, it's really they're using the same criteria they would use for bulk variance requests, which really don't apply to sign variance requests. So we have come up with criteria after looking at several different ordinances that do address that. We have come up with criteria specifically for sign variance requests. Now, in your agendas, you'll have the actual, again, the proposal that we are forwarding to you tonight. The very last page, which is, I guess, the back of the last page, you'll see a section that says accessory amendments to the new sign resolution. In addition to the changes we're making, we've identified a few other areas in our zoning resolution that would also need amendment to kind of make everything consistent. The first of those is in Article 1, which is our first section, Section 1.05. Under prohibited uses, we would delete subsection C, which talks about installation of signs, whether temporary or permanent use, which blink, flash, move in any way, except informational public service signs. We would delete that because it's already in these regulations. It would really just be kind of a duplicate, so it's really no reason to have it in there. The largest change really is under Section 2.02 in definitions. We would delete all of these definitions that are currently in the definitions section of the resolution because they're going to be included actually in the new sign regulations. We're actually going to have them in that same section with the sign regulations. So they're not having to go back and forth from the beginning of the book to Section 20 to find out how something is defined. So this would just take those out and they would be replaced by the new definitions which are included in the proposed amendments. Under Section 1304, under accessory structures and uses, we would amend that particular section by taking out that where it says signs and it says except advertising signs. We would strike that out of there because really it's not even necessary at this point. Signs subject to the provisions of Article 20, which is the article where the signage is proposed to be. Of course, Article 20, which is the current sign section, we would just replace that entirely with what we're proposing here. And then Article 21 and Section 21.04, there's a section in there that deals with nonconforming signs. Again, this is going to be handled within the sign regulations themselves, so this becomes superfluous at that point. So that's just a quick overview of the proposed changes that we are making. Again, we're having this public hearing tonight just to get input from the public and the sign folks. We sent out notices again to about 60 different sign companies in the area and are hoping to have some comments here tonight and have any discussion. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Anyone have, yes.
Doug, to stay on task for tonight, basically this public hearing to listen to any comments, any changes that's going to be announced or any issues with the ordinance at all. Then is our plan to digest that, or is it to make a motion and get it going tonight, or are we really basically going to digest that and then bring this up next month for an approval or whatever, or any other?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off before you finished.
That's basically it, yeah.
Okay. Well, basically, I think what we need to do is just really just kind of see where the discussion goes. If there's several comments and they're comments that we need to look into a little more, then I think it'd be a good idea to just defer action on this until we've had a chance to look into that. If the comments, on the other hand, are comments that we can kind of make changes on the fly, where things is not really going to substantially change what we've got in here, then I would recommend we go ahead and approve it tonight. So I just be curious to see where the discussion goes, and we'll just kind of decide at that point. If we feel we have enough information that we can go forward, fine. If not, we can put this off into to our day meeting and discuss it more at that point. So.
Okay. Is anyone here? Yes, sir.
Mr. Demasi, the definitions, are these the ones that are not italicized? Are they the same as what we had before, such as where it says abandoned sign here on the very first page? It says gives directions or identifies, describes, or gives directions to locating any business or establishment no longer in operation. Now, I don't know, a pretty simplistic thought here, but sometimes a place is out of business for 30 days and somebody else comes in and, you know, and they use the same sign or put new wording on the sign, and how do you define a place that's no longer in operation? I mean, should that not have a time limit? Because you see a lot of places have a sign, place go out of business, and then 3 or 4 weeks, a month later, another place is rented to somebody else and they utilize the same sign. Now that sign, if the rules change during that time and that becomes more than a non-conforming sign, does that have to come down or something like that? And I just wonder about if there should be some wording here, because as the rules change, there are a lot of signs that will be grandfathered in, and I don't want to see somebody in an established building have to tear a sign down because it was vacant for 30 days or something like that.
Well, and I mean, obviously we'll work with those situations. I mean, when I think of an abandoned sign, I think of a sign that's been up for months, if not years, that's sitting out there, and I guess that's kind of what I think about that. Now, as far as the non-conforming, like when you say when the rules change, there is a section in here that deals with non-conforming signs that were in existence as of the date of this resolution. So, I mean, this isn't a situation where we're going to approve new rules and then we're going to automatically go out and start telling everybody they have to conform with the new regulations. So, yeah.
Well, I know we all have the best of intentions here tonight, but say 5 years down the road, and there's a different bunch of planning commission members and all, and you know, and I just personally, I'd feel better if there was some sort of time, a sign of the business had been vacant for 6 months or a year or something like that. But I just a little something that's probably pretty minor, but I'd hate to see somebody caught in a trap right there to tear a sign down or something. Yeah, and if that's the same definition we've been using before, it may have been working fine. Is that new wording, or is that something that was already in?
Let me see.
It's right here, 20.01 under definitions, the very first thing on the front page here, where it says abandoned sign.
Yeah, let me just, sorry. Yeah, that's a new definition. That's not currently in our resolution.
You just put that on your list of things to think about after.
A time frame on it. Mike.
Doug, as I remember in the study, when we had a study group about this, the changeable copy signs, there was I remember discussing how fast they could change. Do we have a definition for that, and do we need one? Or
yeah, it's actually right now it's in section 20.03. It's under prohibited signs.
What page on?
It's page 7. At the very bottom under O. And basically what it says is signs with any automatic changeable copy where the copy does not remain fixed, static, motionless, and non-flashing for a period of 5 minutes. So we're looking at 5 minutes at this point. Now, when we looked at we did our research on this, I mean, we found really a pretty large range of what was the interval that was used for changing of the copy. Some were looking at 8 seconds to 10 seconds. Some were looking at as much as 20 minutes. So we thought 20 minutes was too long, but maybe 8 to 10 seconds was not long enough. So at this point, we looked at 5 minutes as a kind of a middle of the road.
Yeah, I see there's a differentiation about the date, time, and temperature too.
Right.
In there.
Yeah, that
sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we'll open it up to a public hearing. Does anyone wish to ask any questions or speak? You're welcome to come forward.
Good evening. My name is Don Wright. I live at 3643 Meadowwood Drive, which is out in Franklin Road, Rucker Lane area in Mr. Farley's district. I've been a resident of Rutherford County since '82. I am here this evening because I am, in a sense, in the sign business. I have a company called Billboard Consultants. We operate as findabillboard.com. Please understand that I do not own any sign structures, so this does not necessarily impact me. Whether it passes or not, I will still continue to make a living because most of my living is made outside of Rutherford County. But I do have a few questions this evening on the on and off premise signs. So let me, and Mr. DeMasi and I have not talked. I was not able to attend the first hearing that was held or the study group together because I got the notice late and I was out of town. Under section 20.03, prohibited signs, where it says under B, flashing, fluttering, etc., I guess my question is, does that include digital signs that are now become very popular across the country? Under section H, which says wind-blowing or inflated signs, I want us to be very careful if that is defining as flag signs. As the city of Murfreesboro has defined, a flag sign such as the American sign, American flag, is prohibited because you cannot distinguish between commercial and non-commercial message. So let's be sure we have a better definition on that. Under section O, where it talks about the changing of the message for every 5 minutes, Mr. Scott maybe can correct me, but I have to believe the standard industry is more somewhere around the 8 to 15 second range. 5 minutes is an awfully long time to keep the same message there if you're trying to reach a different traveling public that's going down the road. So I'm not really sure where the idea of 5 minutes came from, but I think that is something that needs to be studied under O. Again, let's go to P, where it discusses varying light, illumination, etc. Does that also, again, impact digital type signs for service stations and time and temps and maybe even the opportunity of the billboards? So let's consider that. Bringing on down to section 20.04, allowed signs. Again, I have to ask under items A6, flag displaying non-commercial message. I think we need to be very careful there because, again, the city attorney of Murfreesboro has found an ordinance out of California, a judge ruling out of California that declared the American flag was a sign. And to give you an example now, in the city of Murfreesboro, you cannot have more than 3 flag signs per zone lot. So if you're very patriotic, you cannot fly your American flag, Tennessee flag, and any other flag if you like. That is your limit. So let's be very careful there. Item number 9 concerns me. It says school boards or advertising signage located on athletic fields. Currently, Christiana School and I believe Eagleville School has signage that does face the highway. Is that saying that those signs will now need to be turned around and can only face inside the field? I do know those have been revenue producing for those schools' athletic programs, which has helped save the taxpayers some money. Again, go on down to, let me make sure I'm correct, under B, and we get on down to C. Again, it has flags containing commercial message. Here it has 2 per lot. So my question is, if the American flag, according to the city attorney in Murfreesboro, is a sign, are we being told I can only fly a American flag and a Tennessee flag, or 2 American flags on that lot? Down to G, where you've got interstate on-site ground signs. The height says shall not exceed 50 feet. My question is that measured from the bottom or to the top? And let's consider that along the interstate on I-24, we have a lot of tall trees, and when you start putting signs behind trees, they might as well not stop at the exit. Now, the ones that have my concern is on down to item I, which is referred to as billboards off-premise signs. Number 1, it states that you can have 1 per lot with 1 sign face allowed per direction. I would like to have a little clarification on that, and the reason is, if Mr. Phillips owns 5,000 linear feet along I-24, the way I read that, you can have 1 billboard. But if Mr. Jordan owns 1,000 and I own 1,000, Mr. Farley owns 1,000, you can have a billboard every 1,000 feet. So why should a person who has a lot of linear feet be penalized because they happen to have a long lot? To me, you're getting into a property rights issue, preventing that property owner from obtaining as much revenue off that land as they can obtain. So I'd like a little clarification on that. The state allows a billboard every 1,000 feet, and I think that is plenty enough to stick to that. But if you're going to say you can only have one per lot, then I think you're really going to be hurting some property owners. Again, under the height, it says sign and structure shall not exceed 35 feet. Again, that is awfully low, and is that going to be measured to the bottom of the sign structure or to the top of the sign structure? On down, it says location. It is allowed only along the frontage of I-24 and shall not be located within 200 feet of residential. That's not a problem. I did not know if this was already in the ordinance or something's being proposed, but if Highway 231 or some other roads begin to increase in traffic, are we saying we're not going to allow off-site signs in there? If, let's say, Eagleville is allowed to get a McDonald's, are we saying that a billboard cannot be erected on that major highway that's going in and out of Eagleville to help a McDonald's or any other establishment there? I do know that this was probably put in years ago because Mrs. Nancy Allen, former county executive, attempted to prohibit any signs being built on 840. I understand where she was going, but unfortunately she came right back and wanted to get an off-site sign built for the Speedway, so I was totally confused on what she was trying to do. But I want to make sure we have an avenue left that if 840 is ever declared an interstate and you start getting more and more commercial development built on 840, that we allowed to, or at least would consider off-site signage. One of the arguments that are used on that road for off-site signage is what's called the DOT logo signs. That's the blue signs you see. Let me let you know a little about those. Those are controlled by the state. There are parameters that they give you. They can only advertise something at the next exit, and each one of those business establishments at that exit will have to meet certain criteria. And to give you an example, if there was a logo sign on 840 and it crosses I-24, there is nothing at the exit with I-24, so you cannot advertise that there is motel and hotels at the Murfreesboro or Smyrna exit off of 840 using those logo signs. So, but you can do them at Northwest Broad and other places. The other question I have in relation to off-site signs is if a church on Franklin Road wants to advertise that they're meeting 1 mile off of Franklin Road, and they put a sign up on Franklin Road, is that defined as an off-site sign? If it is, then all these country churches that we have in Rutherford County are not going to be allowed to put little signs up to announce that they're down there. So I want us to really consider that. The other question I have is auction signs for realty companies. Will those be defined as off-site signs or temporary signs? You must be very careful on how you define that and you allow that to happen. We go down to the spacing. It says that they must be 1,000 feet, etc., but they must be 1,000 feet from the closest billboard. I guess my question on that, is it 1,000 feet from the billboard structure, measured to the edge of the property line, or measured to another billboard? So I'm a little unclear on how that is being done there. Again, on the temporary signs, let's go on down to 20.5, Section C, under directional signs. I am very confused on number 3. It says up to 4 directional signs are allowed per intersection, but then it says each event is allowed only 1 sign per intersection. Does that mean that 4 different events can have 1 sign, or does that really mean that only an event can have 1 sign? The other question that's come up in the city of Murfreesboro is if you put up 3 signs on your lot, and particularly in politics, and someone comes along and puts a 4th sign up, today all 4 signs would be illegal. There is no permitting or processing that's being done in the city of Murfreesboro. So if one of you are running for office and there are 4 people running against you and all 4 of you happen to slip in and put signs on the same lot, then immediately all your signs, if I read this correctly, can be pulled up. I don't want to see us getting to the enforcement to where we have to add staff like the city of Murfreesboro has had to do to just handle signs. So when I look down here at number 5 that it says signs must be removed within 48 hours, I think that is a great selection and choice to make on wording, but the question is who's going to enforce that. I have no problem with a sign ordinance. When I moved to Murfreesboro in 1982, I went down to the city hall and I said I need a copy of the sign ordinance and was told we don't have one. And I said we need one. When a sign person says you need one, they immediately go, what's he up to? So I don't have a problem with the sign ordinance, but let's don't put small businesses and churches and events that are going on in this community at a disadvantage that they cannot put these out. I know that city planner of Murfreesboro, Joseph Adelot, complained about 2 signs that were put on Franklin Road opposite Franklin Road Baptist. Personally, as somebody who's getting older and having a hard time to see, I have no problem with those signs in front of those 2 businesses because they are large letters, they are not intrusive on the land, and they can be read across 5 lanes of traffic when you count the 2 lanes and the median and of course a shoulder and then a setback. So it is workable and I commend you for at least looking at it, but let's continue to give it some ideas and thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, anyone have questions? Any questions? Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
My name is Mike Scott. I'm with Signs by Scott here in Murfreesboro. I've been here since 1972, so I too was here before the sign ordinance. I have a couple problems with the ordinance, and I do appreciate this opportunity to get up here and speak. Like I said in the newspaper, the city of Murfreesboro considers us the enemy, and I don't want to be considered that way. I want to be considered part of the community and able to help with my expertise. The main problem I see with what's being proposed is the 50-foot interstate sign. And don't get me wrong there, I don't build interstate signs, so I'm not really involved in it. But I do see problems with it. We have a mixture in every community of franchises and local businesses. And the signage out front of these businesses, when you're local, seems to be the best thing you can do to advertise. So you don't have to pay for TV advertising, radio, newspaper, which is very, very expensive. So these signs out front are really a great asset to local businesses. Now, as you're driving down an interstate and going anywhere, you want to look for restaurants, you want to look for motels, you want to look for gas stations, and some other things that might be there at that exit that you might want to stop and look at. If you limit signs to a 50-foot height, as the city of Murfreesboro has at these intersections, there's no way you can see them. People are going right through Murfreesboro and they're going to Manchester, or they're going right through and they're going to Nashville. They're going to skip us, we're going to lose tax revenue. And you're going to hurt a small businessman. The 50-foot height sign sounds like it's real high, but if you're driving down the side of the interstate and there's a 40-foot tree there, and you've got a 50-foot sign, you don't see that sign till it's right directly beside you. You don't see it before you get there because that 40-foot tree doesn't block the 50-foot sign. And George Huddleston had a presentation that he brought before the city, a PowerPoint presentation, where they went out and put a cherry picker at 50 feet and they drove all around different directions, different speeds. And he couldn't be here this evening. He still got that PowerPoint presentation. But he proved that you cannot see those signs. And 50 foot is not going to be the maximum height you see of trees on interstates. They're going to go up 60, 70 feet before it's over with. And he proved with his presentation that right now at the intersections in Murfreesboro, or the interstate intersections, that 100 feet is the minimum that you can do it. And right now it's at 125 feet. That's what the rule is. But if you go down to 50 feet, you might as well do away with the sign and put it on the ground right in front of your business and hope somebody turns off of that intersection and sees your business and spends money with you. It's just not going to work. And it doesn't level the playing field for franchise businesses versus local businesses. Now, Don Wright just briefly touched on these little interstate signs, the blue ones out there that says gas stations at this exit or eateries at this exit. But those are very limited. They're on a first-come, first-served basis by the state. And these franchises are always on top of these roads and intersections long before they're built, and they're the first ones to turn in the paperwork to get their name on that sign. And there can only be so many of those blue signs at each intersection. So if you are a local business, you're more than likely not going to be on that sign. But even if some of them do get on that sign, they're limited. And I think it's like 9. Am I right, Don, right? There's 9 that are limited on those signs? 6, excuse me. You're only allowed to have 6 businesses, and that's it. So the first 6 that get on there, they've got it made. But if you're like me, driving down the interstate, a lot of times you're paying attention to traffic. You don't have time to look at those and read all 6 of them because they're quite small. So you don't know if you can get off this exit or not. You don't know if it's there. And I hate to see anybody miss Murfreesboro, not spend their money here on whatever and the tax revenue that we're going to get. I hate to be a person driving down an interstate and run into an area where things like this have happened and I can't tell if there's something there that I need or not. I just go to the next town to get it. And I don't think we need to be in that position. The LED signs that we've talked about here, I don't think that's clear at all either. I think it needs to be defined a little bit more as far as the action. The time, the 5-minute change is just way out of proportion, as Don said. It's not even feasible to have a changeable sign if you're going to change it every 5 minutes because nobody's going to be there to see the second message. And that's about all I have to say today, but I do appreciate the opportunity to come speak before you and try to lend my expertise to what you guys are doing. And I'll always be available if anybody has any questions in the future. If something else comes up, I'd like to be a part of it. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone have questions, Mr. Scott? Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Anyone else wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Anthony Johnson, 101 Governor Court, Smyrna, Tennessee. I just had a few concerns here that I would like for you to maybe address or readdress. The first one was on page 7, section 20.03, prohibited signs. Section E, snipe signs. It's my understanding those are include your yard sale signs. To me, that's a little too prohibitive. I think you should be able to have yard sale signs, and also not only on your own property, but say if you have someone at the end of a street that would be on a main highway, I think you should be able to place a sign in their yard with permission to direct to your property. The wind, section H, the same page. Section H, wind-blown or inflatable signs. I'd like to see that changed to be allowed under temporary use, because I can understand not having those day after day, you know, like for years, but I would like to see that maybe under temporary use. The automatic changeable signs under section O, same page 7. Please consider less time on the changing instead of 5 minutes. I think that is just too long. But there again, you don't want it just flashing constantly either, so just please address that. Section G on page 11. Have the height of interstate signs at 50 feet. There again, I'd like for you to readdress this issue and possibly at least go with 100 feet, because based on just what's been said, I won't try to repeat. Changeable copy, that's under Section G, but under 5 on page 11. Changeable copy, the way it is here, it's 50% of the sign area can be changed. There again, if you would take another look at that and possibly allow the 100%. It's 5 under G on page 11. Under I, billboards off premises signs, that's also on page 11. I'd like for you to take a look at maybe just omitting the first item under I, and that's limiting to 1 per lot. Just take out the limitations for the lot and have the 1,000 feet apart, like the gentleman had previously said. Under section 20.05 on page 12, number 2, I'd like to see that change from limiting a maximum of 5 signs to maybe having unlimited signs, but no duplicate signs. So maybe just one person couldn't put up 100 signs of their own, but like the gentleman said before, if you have 4 or 5 people running in the same race, it wouldn't really be fair to say, okay, we're going to cut you off at 4 or whatever. I think you should be able to support the person you want to support. And under section 20.06 on page 13, under permits required, or I guess this is a question, just are temporary signs required to be permitted? And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, does anyone have questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Everybody's welcome. Okay, anybody else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. I think we got a little bit more, Doug, than we can tonight. Questions? Okay.
There are been some good discussion here tonight, from the 3 people that spoke. I agree 100% on the flag issue. We don't need to go down that avenue if we don't have to. What do we need to do on that to make sure that flags are not prohibited?
Well, as I understand what Mr. Wright was saying, and I think his concern is addressed in here. Under the signs allowed in all zoning districts on page 8, under section 20.04, where it says signs allowed in all zoning districts, no permit required. Okay, there's number 6. It says flag displaying non-commercial messages, government flags, which would include an American flag, civic flags, whatnot. They can have that. Okay, now that does not fall under the prohibited sign as far as the windblown and inflatable sign. At least that's not our intent to do that.
But now, that's the thing,
right?
And you say that's not our intent. Mm-hmm. But that's a matter of an opinion.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we can fix that by under the prohibited sign, under where it says windblown signs, just put not including flag signs. I mean, I think we can handle that pretty easily. Now, in answer to his question regarding are you allowed to have one American flag and then one other commercial flag? The answer to that question would be no. You are allowed to have a flag displaying a non-commercial message by right, and then looking at the flag signs allowed in either residential or commercial districts, you can have what's permitted in that district. Like if it's in a commercial district, you're allowed to have 3 commercial flags per lot. So the non-commercial flag and the commercial flags are two different things. So you could have your one flag, American flag, which would be up to 60 square feet, and then have your 3 commercial flags on top of that, or along with that.
Well, from my understanding is that there's an opinion out there that commercial and non-commercial flags are the same.
Okay,
from my understanding, there was a court ruling.
Well, I mean, I heard him say something about California, which is in our circuit for one. Now, I don't know if, I know he also mentioned the city of Murfreesboro. Again, opinion is just that, an opinion. Now, the way we're proposing to regulate these, we're looking at commercial versus non-commercial messages on flags. Now, again, we can look into that. I mean, that's something that we can.
I think what I'd like to see is if I'd like to see that people put up the American flag. I'd like to see if someone wants to put up the state flag. You know, the prisoner of war, POW flags that are out there. I mean, I'm 100% in favor of being allowed to do those things, and I don't want this ordinance to prohibit that.
Okay, and this ordinance won't. I mean, based on the way it's written at this point. You can have your non-commercial flag, your government, your civic flag, but the flags you're referring to, your state flag, an American flag. Now, what we need to be careful of is in this anywhere starting to specifically call those kind of flags out, where an American flag is exempt from these regulations, or a state flag, or you insert the flag is exempt from these regulations. That's when you start getting into what are called content-based distinctions and exceptions to your zoning code. That's what we're trying to avoid here by keeping these categories as broad as we can.
I don't have Murfreesboro's ordinance in front of me, but I think it's labeled basically the same way. And what you're talking about is like I've seen oil change places do it, or car lots do it, or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's an actual flag, but it's advertising whatever it is. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but if we need to put another word in it or something to make it more helpful, but non-commercial or non-advertising type flag is exactly that. And then that would be your American flag, your state flag, any flag it's non-advertising. So I think what the intent here is, and we want to make sure that that's right, and it's brought a good question, but like those flags that businesses use, and I think the little man that you flip the air thing on and he goes way up in the air, and he's doing his hands up and balls up and down, that's considered almost the same thing. That, and then the flags that bow, they bow over and they're kind of like a half diamond shape or something like that, or whatever, all kinds of shapes now, but I mean, all that's advertisement type stuff. And there are some that car lots use, and I don't want to pick on car lots, but I'm just saying, especially car lots, just for trying to catch your attention to look that way. They're non-advertising, but they've got different colors, different shapes, different sizes, different lengths and widths, and all that is for basically just like the streamers are for, catching your attention to look this way. If they look that way, then they're going to see a car that they want and all that sort of stuff. But if you have it all over the place, then you're looking at a lot of issues with getting into the power lines or being in the right of way and all that sort of stuff. And so that's what we're trying to put into an ordinance.
But if I'm a business and I want to put up American flag, I won't be able to put up American flag and not have to worry about it being.
Yeah, and you can. According to this, you can.
You can, yeah, and Mr. Sandlin is correct. If you look under, again, 20.04, signs allowed in all zoning district without a permit, under number 6, it allows you to put up a flag, an American flag. Even if you have commercial flags already there, advertising a commercial message, you can put up the American flag along with that, based on the way we have this written at this point.
But it says here, prohibited signs, and number H, wind blown.
And we can, and I can, Mr. Wright made a good point when he said that. Again, our intent, and like you said, that can, be construed differently over time, was not to include flag signs in that. I think we handle that just as easily as saying, under that particular item, wind-blown and inflatable sign or inflated signs, excluding flag signs as permitted in this article. I think that's a valid point, and I think that can be taken care of pretty easily.
Okay. I also agree with the deal about and I brought this up early on, the deal about the interstate signs. Mm-hmm. 50 feet to me is not tall enough.
Well, let me just explain where I got those regulations from, and maybe Mr. Scott and I are looking at two different codes. I don't know, or maybe I'm missing a section. I'm holding right here Murfreesboro's that page of Murfreesboro's city code dealing with interstate on-site signs. And height is a 50-foot maximum. What you're seeing in this amendment that we have, we patterned as closely as we could to what Murfreesboro has in their current regulations. Now, Smyrna does have 120 feet for their maximum height, but Murfreesboro City only has 50. Now, really, at this point, the only place where that's really going to come into play is at the Epps Mill Road, the Buchanan interchange. Of course, now you have to remember that's all on city sewer, which means that they have to abide by city requirements. Even if we change our height to say, okay, we're going to let you have 100 feet, the city's going to come back if you're on the sewer and say, well, based on our regs, you can only have 50. Now, again, maybe as far as I know, I'm looking at the most updated version of this, and I'm pretty sure that this is accurate. So I don't know where they're getting the 100-foot from. Maybe I'm not seeing, maybe we're looking at two different sections, I don't know, but that we patterned what we have in here off of what Murfreesboro had. And quite frankly, we haven't changed a whole lot regarding billboards. Well, that's a different discussion. We're talking about the on-site signage, but...
So Murfreesboro's interstate on-site ground sign right now says 50 feet?
That's what I've got right here. Again, and this is the May 21st, 2009 edition, unless I'm just missing something.
Have they changed that? Because, I mean, it was... It seemed like it... It seemed like...
If they did, then this is the version that they have on their website.
Yeah.
So if they've changed that, I don't know. But this says 50 feet right here, and that's what we patterned it off of. Actually, again, we don't even have this kind of sign right now in our code. Any sign really at this point is limited to 35 feet in height. So this is actually going above and beyond what we normally would allow anyway. We'd make a provision for this. And I can understand where they're coming from. I'm not saying I disagree with them. I'd be curious to know if they're looking at something I'm just not looking at.
Mr. Chairman, can I have a little latitude with, I know the public hearing's over, but...
Well, let's just open public hearing up, because this is
the
discussion we need to do with them.
We need it.
I make a motion to suspend the rules to allow questions for Mr. Wright.
Well, or any sign folks or whoever.
Or just Mr. Scott to answer.
Okay. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carried. Ask.
I was just going to ask Don or Mr. Scott, either one, that, I mean, I guess they've changed that, but back when I was in the codes enforcement with the city of Murfreesboro, maybe they went before the board of a zoning appeals or something and got approved, because I know some interstate high-rise signs, like some eating establishments, I'll just put it that way, was approved for like 100, 120 feet.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Scott. He says that the city of Murfreesboro is 50 foot on the interstate. Inside the city is 35 foot.
So they had to go before the board to get approved, I guess, because there's some restaurants that are higher than 50.
Just recently,
on-site interstate high-rise signs.
Like last fall, this was changed for the city of Murfreesboro. And it was changed from 125 feet to 50 feet. And they also changed, if you're within 2,000 feet of an intersection, it used to be 1,000 feet. And they changed at that same time, which gets confusing.
Okay.
Any signs that are inside city limits are 35 feet.
Yeah.
Let me give an example. The Clarion Hotel that used to be the Holiday Inn, it is my understanding, if you go by there, there is a box up there that has nothing in it. The reason is, and Mr. DeMasi can maybe help define it, but they removed so much of the sign that then it became an illegal sign, and that if they went back and put the same cabinet up, they would be in violation of the sign ordinance unless they lowered their sign.
Mm-hmm.
And it had something to do with they had rebuilt the sign so far. And so what's happened is people like Nobody's Business that took over Corky's, kept the existing sign there, put in new paneling, and they were still legal.
Yeah. But see, this same size requirement would go into effect like you had 2,000-foot radius here from the center point of I-24. For instance, Old Fort Parkway, if my mind has not failed too much, but Outback Steakhouse was the 2,000-foot mark or whatever that mark was at that point. And so on-site interstate high-rise sign could not be, any higher than 50 or whatever it was by that point. So that gives you a kind of a distance measurement there from the interstate down Old Fort Parkway of where you could have an on-site interstate high-rise sign. Otherwise, you got an on-site sign that's no higher than 35 feet. Yeah.
Right. What you said is exactly true. Outback Steakhouse at that intersection is the cutoff point. Any of the signs that are built on the other side of that lot have to meet the city specifications, which are 35 feet. So anybody beyond that really loses out.
Which we're probably not going to have a perfect sign ordinance. Nobody does, I don't guess. But they still have that avenue of going before the Board of Zoning Appeals to apply, even whatever we put in, to apply for a variance on some of these things but we're trying to get into a middle of the road playing ground here of a good working sign ordinance. So that's our main goal.
The road's not 50 feet, believe me.
All right.
Well, I do know, and it came up the Epps Mill Buchanan Road exit, they had to then go under the city codes because the city supplied the water and all. But I think there were already some businesses down there that had some pretty high signs, and I think they were penalized. And the same thing came about. Mr. Farrell had, I talked about so many billboards per zone lot. Well, Mr. Farrell had footage down there he could build 2. But if this ordinance was passed the way you're talking about it, he could have only built 1. So instead of making $3,000 a month, he's making $1,500 a month.
Mr.
I think that was a good point.
While you're up here, you said 8 to 15 seconds, right, instead of 5 minutes?
I would think that the standard industry is probably 8 to 15 seconds. I know on the digital billboard on Old Fort Parkway, it changes every 10 seconds. The ones that they have built nationwide. So I'm like what was said earlier. I don't want us to get into the flashing signs. I have been into Lebanon and they flash, but I was over in Cool Springs Saturday night, and even Cool Springs Mall has a digital sign, but I think it changed about every 8 to 10 seconds over there.
Okay, comment on it. Comment on that. Jake?
Well, I mean, I don't disagree with them. The industry standard does seem to be 8 to 10 seconds or thereabouts. Again, there is always the concern about driver distraction with these kind of time frames. That's really, when you look at the research that has been done in planning circles especially, that's one of the biggest concerns that there is. Now, I don't think we need something like a 20-minute like I've seen in some jurisdictions. I mean, we may even, 5 minutes was like, again, kind of the middle of the road. I mean, we could even look at a 3 or 1 minute. I don't know if I'm comfortable with an 8 to 10 second at this point until we've had a chance to really test drive what we've got at this point with the sign regulations. Again, this is really the first time we've started going into this direction with these digital type signage. And at this point, I just don't know if I'm real comfortable with that.
Would 30 seconds to 1 minute would be comfortable? Would that be?
If anybody has drove over on Old Fort Park and saw that digital billboard over there, it does change every 10 seconds. And if you'll sit there at a light as it changes, you'll think that thing is taking forever to change. I mean, it's what you consider slow, and it's 10 seconds. But also, the concern has been raised, not just in our community, but other communities, about the safety of these things changing. And there's currently ongoing a study right now by the United States government of digital signs on highways to see about the safety. But the consensus before they even got into this was it's not a distraction to drivers to cause wrecks. And probably the best example right here locally of that situation is the one that sits over in front of MTSU, that changes, pops, jumps, it does everything that probably a lot of people don't want signs up and down Broad Street doing. But there have been no wrecks. There's not a bunch of wrecks over there. There haven't been any cited anywhere in Murfreesboro that contributes that sign, or even partially contributes that sign. So the safety factor is really non-existent, and everybody is anxious for this federal study to be done. It's due to be done this year, and I don't know exactly what date.
We've looked at, and just kind of in response to that, the Federal Highway Administration is currently doing that study. In our most recent planning magazine, they actually make mention of it and expect findings to be released shortly. They didn't really give a date or anything. Now, in response to what Mr. Scott's saying about the driver distraction and safety, while I agree with him partially on the fact that maybe one sign somewhere is not going to be distracting, what we are proposing here is looking at these type signs in all of our commercial areas and in some of our residential areas. Not that everybody will take advantage of that type of technology. If you have one sign that's changing every 8 to 10 seconds, okay, yeah, you may not notice it after a while. But if you have a series of signs that over a course of half mile, mile, or however you insert the distance, is changing, and they're all changing at different intervals, I'm sorry, I think that has the potential to be distracting. And the studies, you know, like Mr. Scott was saying, you know, there has not been a definitive study that says that these signs cause distractions, but there are multiple studies that do show that driver distractions, especially from outside sources, outside the vehicle, are responsible for a good amount of accidents. I don't have the data right in front of me, but we've seen that constantly in the research that we have done.
Well,
so
you've got a space, minimum space between billboard signs. Why can you not have a minimum space between copy signs?
Well, the biggest issue,
or something like that.
Okay, the biggest issue you run into with that, Mr. Jordan, is that, okay, I have store A on a piece of property, and you're right next door to me with store B. I decide one day I'm going to go ahead and put some automatic changeable copy signs on mine, and let's say that there's a 500-foot distance. Well, you're within that 500 feet. All of a sudden, now you are prohibited from ever using that technology.
Same thing happens on the interstate. First come, first serve. If they're within 1,000 feet apart, you know, if I've got a field and I get my sign up, and Richie's got a field beside me and it's within 1,000 feet, he's out. You know, so the same thing happens there. I mean, Yours is going to fall. Mine's going to fall. I know. I see a lot of issues. I agree with most of the things they've said here. Now, I'm worried about the ball field signs. You know, is that going to become illegal? You know, and we have got many schools out there that have signs on the ball fields, and I'm worried about the billboard sign per lot. Exactly like this, somebody's got a mile of frontage, they get one sign. I think
I'll say that's currently our regulation. Yeah. That's not changing.
Well, as long as we got this opened up, we might as well look at it.
Okay, well, and I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I don't want you to think that we just came up with this as a mean to punish somebody.
If somebody were to build a billboard today at Epps Mill on something that was, or Buchanan Exchange, that was not on city sewer, how tall could their billboard be?
Right now, 35 feet. And that's not proposed to change under what we're having.
Right now, on an interstate.
On a billboard or on an on-site
the tallest sign, on-site or a billboard either.
Okay, on-site sign, we don't even make provision for on-site interstate signs at this point. Now, the billboards, again, would be limited to 35 feet. That's currently
35 feet today?
That's the regulation today.
Is that to the top of the bottom?
That's to the top.
It's top.
Yeah.
We had you had some members of the Planning Commission look, a subcommittee, correct, look at this? Earlier, did you not?
No, I mean, we presented our findings to you. We didn't actually have a subcommittee.
I thought maybe there was a
committee
of 3 or 4 members, because there's a lot of issues here. I don't think we're going to work them all out tonight, sitting there trying to piecemeal this together. I'd like to see a committee put together of a few representatives of the Planning Commission. Not me, I would hope, but and trying.
I don't know. You brought it up, Mr. Jordan. Maybe you should volunteer for it.
But first place, if I knew of a way, I would suggest you don't allow electronic changeable signs in any residential area. I mean, that just kind of blew my mind that come up. Number 2, I think you might want to look, when you go into the term of distraction, of regulating the illums at night versus the illumination during the day.
Well, basically what we do, we don't actually call out a particular, NIT, I believe, NIT level for this.
Okay.
Now, what we do propose to how we regulate that is when you look under the changeable copies section, just flip to that so I can read it.
Well, I do know I've been in Gatlinburg. Of course, that's a totally different city, but there are some up there just too bright at night.
Yeah, what we've done it's on page 6 under G, changeable copy, and it's letter C. It says all signs containing automatic changeable copy must be equipped with a mechanism to automatically adjust the brightness in response to ambient conditions, as opposed to calling out a nit level. I mean, because quite frankly, we don't have a nit meter to do that.
Not to argue with Mr. Demasi, but for every argument that planning people can present that it has caused wrecks, I can present you an argument that it has not caused wrecks.
And we can find something that counteracts what you bring up to
Exactly. So you have said a statement twice, let me understand, because I did not know this. Are you saying that off-site signs are not allowed except on I-24 in the current ordinance?
The current ordinance actually has 24 and 840, but that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if somebody down Fosterville or Christiana wanted to put one on 231, they could not?
Not today, no. Even under our current regulations.
Good. The billboard I'm reading to one of my clients just went up in value out of Shelbyville. So.
Mike, did you have a question? Mike, do you have a question?
I want to thank all three of the people that spoke. I think they've had really good input. To Mr. Wright's point, I would remind everyone that the state and the federal government are using changeable copy signs when they're guiding us on traffic, you know. Now that's a needed thing. It is different, I will say that. Two, I think Mr. Wright's point earlier, I would like to ask Josh to check with the city attorney on the flag issue in the Ninth Circuit Court, if that's probably the court it was, if it was a California case. I want to know what the reading was there as to whether the flag is a sign and that kind of thing. I would hope nothing out of the Ninth Court applies to us, but it may well do it. So if you would check on that, I would appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
I want to answer part of Mr. Demasi's question and Will Jordan's question. When you start talking about proliferation of LED signs flashing and carrying on, there's a few exceptions in this world, like Gatlinburg, like Las Vegas. We're not Gatlinburg, we're not Las Vegas. We don't have the same type businesses or nothing. And this situation is going to take care of itself. And the reason I'm saying that is people don't understand how expensive these LED signs are. This billboard that you're looking at on Old Fort Parkway is only one side. That's $750,000. Now, if you opened this up and said anybody in the county can have one of these things that wants one of any size, even the small ones are like $20,000 and $25,000. How many businesses do you think are going to have these things? They can't afford the price of the sign. They can't afford the installation. They can't afford the repairs on them. This is why Smyrna has them opened up. You can use them in Smyrna. You don't see that many. You can go to Lebanon. They've got them opening up. You don't see that many. They're way too expensive, fellas. They take care of themselves.
While I agree with Mr. Scott to an extent, I will also say, though, that the technology, of course, as any technology, as it progresses, becomes more affordable. We're looking, of course, right now we're not looking at the digital billboards as what we're looking to regulate. We're not allowing those at this point, really pending more the outcome of that federal study, for one. We're looking at the smaller ones, which aren't nearly as expensive as some of the ones he's talking about. I don't disagree with what you're saying about the one on Old Fort Parkway, but the technology is becoming more prevalent, it's becoming more affordable, and it has the potential to be used by folks even within the next 5-10 years that maybe have not used it at this point. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be argumentative, and I hope I'm not coming across that way, but there are two sides to this. And as your planning director, my job is to try to present as much data that we can. And that's what I'm planning on doing. So,
Mike, I have a question. Now, the sign you're talking about on Old Fort, is it a changeable writing sign, or is it one of those billboards type signs that changes the total face of the billboard?
No, this is like a television screen.
Okay, all right.
It's not. They have one on Old Fort down there where the old Crystal used to be that flips like you say. But this is the most recent one that the city of Murfreesboro is involved with a lawsuit over. But like Mr. Gamasi says, this is an open discussion. We're not trying to argue with each other. We're trying to show all sides of this thing. But this sign at MTSU is $125,000. Now, it's a lot smaller than that billboard out there on Old Fort, but it's a double-faced sign. But let's just say that technology advances in the next 5 or 10 years. Instead of $125,000, it's $100,000. How many of those you going to see around town for $100,000?
Let me do correcting. It's a TV screen type, but it is not moving. It does change from one ad to the other, but there's no motion on that.
There's no animation.
Yes, what you're talking about is what's called
one of those
TriVision.
that rotates 2 or 3 times.
It's a TriVision. There'll be 3 ads. That's the most can be done, and will turn.
Mike Cush.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is really not addressed to anybody in particular. These are just comments. I'm looking at the PowerPoint and the notes I took on the PowerPoint from Dr. Eric Kelly. Remember when we went and had one evening to the health department and went through his sign deal? On the electronic and changing signs, things that I made notes of that were not exactly written in his PowerPoints, but when he was just talking off the cuff and giving an opinion, he basically said time and temperature you can do about every 8 seconds. That wasn't a big deal. He also said for the electronic changing signs, like the small ones we see at the Walgreens and the gas stations, things like that, he said his opinion was once every 30 seconds was a better way to go. And you guys touched on it, and I was going to comment on it, but I think a distraction to me more than the time or speed of information changing is the brightness, because I think that is more distracting to it as a driver than anything else. And 8 nits was the kind of a maximum I think he had, in his presentation. And I would agree, Doug, that you attempt to make a clarification on on changeable copy G paragraph C, but I think you ought to go ahead and put a minimum maximum brightness or lumens or nits or something in there. And if for an example, for those of you who drive to Nashville, there's a huge electronic billboard on I-24 somewhere around the Haywood or Bell, or I think it's past Bell Road, and it's on the left as you're driving towards town. That thing is bright. I mean, it doesn't matter what they're showing. That thing is bright, and to me, that's a real distraction.
I'm surprised they have not reduced the elimination.
So I think it's all good and well that we call it out, but maybe we should actually go ahead and limit the lumens or the brightness of the signs. And the last thing was, and you mentioned it, as far as the little red or the electronic changeable signs, if you do 30 seconds, he did say you don't want them to scroll in, you don't want them to box in, you want them to change instantly. So that's not, again, more of an eye distraction.
And and I agree. And we actually, that's actually in here already.
You did talk about that later on in the thing, but he said 30 seconds was good, but don't let it dance around or scroll or box or anything like that. Thank you, gentlemen. And by the way, we do appreciate your comments.
Okay. Steve, I think I cut you off about 30 minutes ago. No? You okay? All right. We don't want the flag thing to come back and bite us, Will. Flag displaying non-commercial, government flags, civic flags, decorative flags. Okay, you've got an American flag, you got a Tennessee flag, you got a POW flag, you got a UT flag, and you got an MTSU flag. There's your 5 flags. Okay? Now, it says on one lot. Now, if I've got 100 acres here, and I've got a rental house and 2 or 3 houses, we need to have some distance here, don't you think? I mean, we want to get out in the country. I mean, in town, lot sizes sort of take care of lot sizes, but when you get out to where your expensive sign is on 231, lot sizes get a little bit bigger. So we need to have some kind of distance on those, I think.
So you're saying on larger acreage tracts have the ability
you can
to
have more than 5 flags.
More non-commercial type flags.
Flags, we just don't want flags to come back, and that's, you had a field full of them out there. What did you have to go through to do that?
That is one of the things that came up because there were 1,500 flags, and according to the city code, 1,497 would have been illegal. And we asked for a variance, and the city did work with us that you could have a temporary event, and you could have more than 3 signs, but no more than 10 days, so that worked out fine. Josh, what she argued, the judge in California ruled that you cannot distinguish between a commercial and non-commercial message in a flag. And that's why she was able to bring in the case out of California, I don't know, but that's what the city went with, and that's probably something we need to talk about Ms. McGannon about, or Dave Ives, I think, who worked on that quite a bit.
Mike?
I got one more thing, and we brought it up, and it's an allowed sign. It's about the scoreboards and advertising signage located on athletic fields if oriented towards the playing field. How do you guys and gals feel about those signs that are facing the ones that people buy to advertise for the ball fields? My kids are all grown, and I had to hustle to call people to donate money for signs, but they were all in the field. They were in the field to play. My personal opinion is those are clutter, and I would like to see them turned inside the field, but I'm just curious as to how this group thinks those school or baseball field type advertising signs, if those are cluttered along the roadway.
One of the sales point, and they've done this at Siegel High School as well, which I'm confused about because that's in the city, but they're selling them and they're off-site signs. I may be wrong, but if they're advertising, if they're at Siegel and Toots has been kind enough to sponsor and Toots puts a sign up there and it's facing Thompson Lane, it's an off-site sign. Same thing in Christiana. When you go by the ball field down there, they're covered in signs facing the road, and they've sold them as off-site signs. To me, at that point, I'm not an attorney, Josh, but at that point, they become off-site signs.
Yeah, I hate to talk about this out loud for all, because I know kids that play sports at Siegel, but how are they having those signs at the ball fields there?
I've asked twice and haven't gotten an answer. So
I can't answer that. I don't know.
I have spoken to Ms. McGannon and Mr. Ives in the past about this. And they claim that there's some kind of a regulation or a rule that county, city schools do not have to follow within the regulations of businesses or everybody else. And where this first came up is there's LED boards within the city, like at Oakland and Riverdale. There's LED boards that you can see from the road, even though LEDs are illegal inside of Murfreesboro. But they can't control them because they're on school property.
They're also at the soccer field. That's city property.
Yeah, that's a little bit different.
Mike, we hadn't answered your question yet. How do we feel about it? Gary?
Is it clutter? Is it legal? Or is it illegal? Is it an off-site sign?
Gary?
Mr. Chairman, I mean, there's been a lot of good questions, a lot of good comments brought up, I think, tonight. I think we're not going to be able to accomplish anything here tonight. We've got input. I think what we need to do is the staff needs to go back, address some of these questions that have been brought up. The legal department needs to address some issues that's been brought up, and basically come back to our next meeting, I guess the day meeting, and kind of make some recommendations and some changes into the program or the proposed sign ordinance. And I make a motion that we defer this and they go back and work on it some more.
Okay. Do I have a second on that? Everybody's bringing this back. You've got everything marked that everybody made comment on tonight.
Yeah, well, I mean, what we can do is, as we get a copy of the recording of this, we can, I mean, we were taking notes, but, I mean, there were a lot of questions raised. Some of the questions that were raised, I think, can be handled pretty easily. But I agree that there are things that are going to require some more research into their answers. And what we can do is come up with a list of the questions and our responses to those, and, you know, what we feel, if any, changes are required in our draft. But yeah, I think, I mean, again, you know, this was the whole purpose of having this discussion, was to get these issues out there to allow us to address them. So, and that's
Mike, that's a comment before we vote.
Yeah, if you hadn't got a second, I'll second it. But what I want to say, I want to appreciate. I mean, I appreciate the input. I also appreciate staff's work on it too, because it's a complicated thing, as we're finding out. But I appreciate everybody's input on it.
All right. Have a motion. Yes, Steve.
I wanted to ask one other question right there. the temporary signage that was brought up also tonight, did you notify like the, I don't know, local real estate companies or something, see, or the MTAR group or something to see if, you know, hey, this is what we're planning on changing? Do you have any feedback from them, or did you notify them?
I don't think they were on the list.
Probably you notify one and get them all, the MTAR group.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they were on the list. The list that we sent out was all sign companies as far as
Okay.
I know. Now, I don't have any issue with that. We
If
can
you
let them
would,
know that we're, yeah.
notify, I believe Candy Roberts over there at MTAR,
But-
Middle Tennessee Association of Realtors,
Yeah, yeah.
over on,
Butler.
yeah,
Yeah,
Butler.
I know you're talking. I've talked to Candy before. Yeah,
Yeah,
I can.
I believe if you do that and let them take a look at this too and see if get any feedback from them before we get ready to approve it, and they may have an issue or something there that
good
we're
point,
not
good
seeing
point.
or something. But
I was brought to my attention that actually Candy does get our agendas, so she may have been aware, and I haven't gotten any comments from her on it, but I'll contact her just to make sure that she knows.
Rhonda?
Doug, I just had a quick footnote on the temporary signage as well. In that, what you keep referencing, like where they're allowed by intersections, and I know in the very last, or the second to last bullet, you reference another section that talks about the setbacks, et cetera, and of course, in that it means that they can't be in the right of way.
Right.
And they can't be in a vision triangle and all that. I'm just wondering, as people read the temporary signage, because I know where this is going to apply to most Rutherford County residents are going to be things like the yard sales, you know, and I know from going to the presentation, we don't want to talk about content of a sign. We just want to talk about the purpose, or the sign itself. And so I just had a question on, would it be prudent to maybe on that temporary directional signs to say that they shall be placed on private property and meet the setbacks and placement, et cetera, et cetera? Because I'm just wondering if that way people realize you can't put them in the median. You can't put them in ditches. You can't put them in the right, because as you read that, it makes it sound like, and it even references along the roadway. I just don't want to give the wrong impression so that they think that it's ever okay to put it anywhere other than private property.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't think that's something that's a big problem to add. I think there is somewhere in there where we actually say signs in the right of way are prohibited, but
you do. You say, and you
yeah.
even refer them back to the section. I'm just thinking a lot of people might not make the leap back to that section.
Right. I mean, I think that's a good point. I think that's something that clarifies that even more so.
Okay, I have a motion to defer. Have a second. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay. Thank everybody. Good input. Thank you very much. Doug, you have
I don't have anything further.
anything else? Dale?
Nothing to answer.
Anybody? Any other business? Have a motion? Have a second.